The Force is old and full of shadows.
The landing ramp descends into ash. Mustafar does not welcome visitors. It burns them. The air above the platform rolls with heat the way water rolls over stone. Constant, indifferent, ancient, cinders drift sideways on currents that have no business being this far from the lava flows. And yet here they are, settling into the folds of a white dress. Catching in hair that cost a handmaiden 3 hours to pin into place this morning on a ship that feels like another life. Padmé Amidala walks down that ramp, and into the worst moment of hers. She has crossed star systems for this. Crossed her own grief, her own terror. The quiet certainty growing in her chest, like a stone that something has already gone wrong. Something she doesn't yet have words for. Only the weight of it, pressing behind her ribs every hour since Coruscant burned orange in the viewport behind her. She has told herself, the entire journey, that she will find him, that she will reach him, that whatever they are saying about Anakin Skywalker is wrong. She finds him on the platform. He stands with his back to her, black cloak motionless in air that should be moving it. His hands are loose at his sides. He is looking at something she cannot see, at the lava falls, maybe, or at nothing at all. At the version of himself he has been choosing, in increments, for months. Anakin, his name, in her voice. The way she says it, careful. The way you speak to something precious that you're afraid to startle, it crosses the platform and finds him between the shoulder blades. He turns, and she sees his face, and for one suspended second she breathes. He is still in there. Padmé, his voice is wrong. Not cruel, not cold. Wrong in a way she cannot categorize. The way a note played in the correct key sounds flat, because the instrument carrying it has been damaged somewhere inside. You came. Of course I came. She is walking toward him already. She cannot help it. 20 meters of black volcanic stone between them, and she is already crossing it, hands, reaching. The stone in her chest dissolving in the relief of his face. I was so worried Stop. The word leaves him like a flinch. His hand rises. She stops. The hand is not pointed at her. It is open, palm outward, asking, pleading. She has seen that hand ignite a lightsaber, and she has felt that hand trace her collarbone in the dark of their apartment, and she has never, until this moment, seen it shake. Stop, he says again. Quieter. Just stay there. Please. Just for a moment. She stays. He closes his eyes. Later, she will not be able to explain what she witnessed in the next 4 seconds. She will try, in a medbay on Polis Massa, in a cell on Alderaan, in 100 private moments over years she cannot yet imagine. She will say, it was like watching someone fall and catch themselves. She will say, his whole body changed, all at once, in a way bodies are not supposed to be able to. She will say, I thought he was dying. She will not be entirely wrong. What Anakin Skywalker experiences in those 4 seconds is not a thought. It is not a vision, not a dream, not any mechanism the living Force has used before in recorded Jedi history. It is simpler and more terrible than any of those things. It is memory. Not his own, not yet, not the memories he has accumulated in 22 years of living. These memories are older, heavier. They carry the specific gravity of a life lived in a black suit, with mechanical lungs and hands that cannot feel, and a name that is not his name. And they arrive not sequentially, but all at once. A single wave, hitting every nerve simultaneously. The scream of a TIE fighter spiraling into vacuum. The weight of a respirator mask in the dark. A voice, young, clear, impossible, saying Father. The green light of a lightsaber thrown aside. An old man's yellow eyes going wide. An emperor falling. An emperor falling. Endor, the forest. The pyre. The mask finally off. The face beneath it ruined and real and his own. And Luke's face in the firelight, his son's face, watching the smoke rise. The memories don't end. They compound. Order 66 in a Jedi temple lit gold by flames and screaming. Padmé's hands going still on a table in a room he cannot reach. 2 children he never held. Decades of breathing. Only breathing. The mechanical in and out of a life that was not living. In service to a man who manufactured his grief to chain him. All of it. All of it arrives in the space between one heartbeat and the next. And Anakin Skywalker, 22 years old, standing on a platform above a lava sea, with his hand raised toward the woman he loves, receives it the way a wall receives a ship at ramming speed. His legs go. He does not fall gracefully. There is nothing cinematic about the way his knees hit the volcanic stone, nothing that resembles the choreographed collapses of holodramas. It is sudden and total and graceless, both knees at once, and his hands come down against the platform to catch himself, and he stays there, crouched over the black rock, breathing in the ash-thick air and ragged pulls that do not seem to be bringing him enough oxygen. No, the word scrapes out of him, barely voice at all. No. No. What did I do? Padmé takes a step forward. A blue blade ignites at the top of the ramp. She had not heard him come down. He moves the way he always moves, present before announced. Silent for a man who fills every room he enters, and now Obi-Wan Kenobi stands on the ramp with his lightsaber lit, and his face a controlled deliberate mask that Padmé has seen him wear exactly twice before, both times when he was certain someone was about to die. The blue light falls across the ash. It falls across Anakin's hunched shoulders. It falls across the stone where his hands are pressed flat, and the small, ugly sound of his breathing. Obi-Wan does not speak. He has prepared words on the journey here. He has rehearsed them somewhere between the hangar and the stars, and the terrible footage burned permanently into the back of his eyes. Children. A lightsaber. A man wearing his brother's face, making choices that cannot be rationalized, cannot be metabolized, cannot be placed inside any category his mind has a name for. He has words. He has the voice that delivered them to Padawans for 15 years. Steady, certain, present. They don't come. What comes instead is the Force, and what the Force tells him stops the words entirely. The signature pressing against his senses from the figure on the stone is not the one he felt in the temple archive room when the recording began playing. It is not the one he tracked across the galaxy in a growing, nauseating certainty. That signature had been familiar and corrupted simultaneously. Anakin's frequency, Anakin's cadence, but with something through it. Something wrong in the way an infection is wrong. Something bright turned opaque. This is not that. What he feels now from the crouched figure on the platform is the Force signature of a man who has been somewhere terrible and returned from it, and it is so recognizably, achingly Anakin, the specific warmth and brightness of it, under everything, like the sun through ash, that Obi-Wan's prepared words dissolve before he can reach them. He does not lower his blade. Anakin raises his head. His eyes find Obi-Wan's across the platform, and what is in them is not defiance, not calculation, not the yellow edge that the footage promised him. What is in them is the specific devastation of a man who has watched himself from the outside and cannot yet locate language for what he saw. He stays on his knees. "Arrest me, Master." The words come out wrecked and immediate, no architecture behind them, no performance. Please. A breath. Just get her off this planet before he arrives. The ash drifts between them. The lava speaks in the distance, indifferent, geological, older than any of this. Obi-Wan stands at the top of the ramp with a lit saber and a face that has not yet decided what it knows. He does not lower the blade. The binders are Padmé's. She carries them in the emergency kit bolted beneath the skiff's passenger bench, standard diplomatic loadout. The kind of precaution her security staff insisted on and she always considered excessive, right up until this moment. They are durasteel with a blue inhibitor strip running the interior circumference of each cuff, and they are the most significant objects on this platform. Obi-Wan holds them without moving. Anakin is still on his knees. He has not attempted to rise. He has not reached for the lightsaber at his hip, has not called on the Force to put distance between himself and the blade still burning 4 meters away. He is breathing through his mouth in the thin, hot air, and his hands are resting open on his thighs, palms upward, in the specific posture of a man demonstrating that his hands are empty. "Put them on me," Anakin says. "The cuffs. Keyed to you, not a lock code. Keep the activation chip on your person." A pause. "You know what I'm asking." Obi-Wan does know. That is precisely the problem. A Sith Lord in calculated surrender would identify the single gesture most likely to lower his captor's guard and execute it cleanly. He has spent enough hours studying Palpatine, or rather, spent enough hours failing to study Palpatine. Failing to see what was directly in front of him for a decade, to understand exactly how a master of deception constructs the appearance of vulnerability. Anakin is asking him to hold the key. It is either the most genuine act of trust Obi-Wan has witnessed in 20 years of soldiering, or it is the most elegant trap he has ever seen baited. "You have 30 seconds, Anakin says, and the flatness in his voice is not impatience. It is a man managing something enormous from the inside, keeping it compressed, choosing precision over feeling because feeling is not available to him right now without coming apart entirely. He'll have launched from Coruscant the moment I stop transmitting. We don't have the duel's worth of time you're calculating. We have less. How do you know what I'm calculating? Because I know you." Something crosses Anakin's face. Not quite pain, not quite grief. Something that has the shape of both without the luxury of either. "I know you better than I know myself right now, Master. I mean that literally." Padmé makes the decision. She crosses the platform in 8 steps. Takes the binders from Obi-Wan's free hand. He lets her, which surprises them both, and closes them around Anakin's wrists herself. The click of the inhibitor strip engaging is small against the sound of the lava. Anakin exhales through his nose, slow and controlled, and then something in his expression shifts in a way that has nothing to do with emotion. "It's immediate," he says, more to himself than either of them. "I forgot how immediate it is. The Force, withdrawn, not gradually, gone, the way a sound drops when a door seals. He has been swimming in it since he was 4 years old on Tatooine, and the water has simply left the pool, and what remains is the specific disorienting silence of a sense he has never once in his life gone without. He gets to his feet. He does it with his own legs and no assistance, and the effort of keeping his face neutral, while his nervous system processes the sudden absence, costs him something visible. "Ship," he says. "Now, they are airborne in 90 seconds. Obi-Wan takes the controls without discussion. Padmé sits in the co-pilot's seat, with her hands pressed flat on her knees and her eyes forward, and Anakin is buckled into the passenger bench behind them, with his cuffed hands in his lap, and the skiff rises off the platform into air that is orange with volcanic particulate and hot enough to stress the hull's outer thermal shielding. Nobody speaks for the first 40 seconds of ascent. The platform drops away below them. The Separatist command center, every one of its leaders already dead. Killed by the man currently sitting in restraints behind the cockpit. Killed with an efficiency that the tactical part of Obi-Wan's mind refuses to stop processing, because the tactical part of his mind has never fully learned to stop working, even when everything around it is on fire. The lava spreads in every direction below, indifferent and luminous, rivers of it flowing toward a horizon that is also orange, that is also burning. Mustafar, a planet that has never stopped its own catastrophe long enough to care about theirs. "There's a flight corridor through the eastern thermal columns," Anakin says from behind them. "Less sensor interference. Palpatine's pilot will take the standard approach vector from the north. It gives us a 3-minute window on the blind side of the moon." Obi-Wan does not ask how he knows this. He adjusts the heading 3 degrees east. "Anakin," Padmé's voice is careful the way a structure is careful when it has absorbed too much load, and is choosing its next movements deliberately. She has not looked back at him. "What did you mean?" "On the platform. He'll have launched." Silence, the hum of the drives, the hull ticking against the heat. "Palpatine is Darth Sidious," Anakin says. Obi-Wan's hands stay exactly where they are on the controls. "The Sith Lord the Council has been searching for." Anakin continues, and his voice has taken on that flat, compressed quality again. Information being delivered by a man who is choosing to treat it as information, rather than as the architecture of his own ruin. He has been in the Chancellor's office for over a decade. He engineered the war. Both sides. The clone army, the separatists, Order 66, all of it constructed to give him an emperor's throne. He is on his way here right now to collect what he believes is his new apprentice. The thermal columns rise around them on the scanners, shimmering interference patterns that turn the instrument readout into static. "We know," Obi-Wan says. "A beat." "The council identified him," Obi-Wan says. "Yesterday, Mace led a team to arrest him." The silence from the passenger bench has a different quality now. "Mace is dead," Anakin says. "It is not a question." Yes, another beat, longer. The skiff punches through a layer of particulate cloud and the orange drops away, and for 3 seconds the viewport is full of stars, real and cold and indifferent, before the upper atmospheric haze thickens again and swallows them. "He told me Mace was going to kill him," Anakin says. "He made me believe." He stops. Starts again, from a different angle, the way a pilot restarts an approach when the first vector is compromised. "I pulled Mace's blade away from his throat. In the window of the office. I gave Palpatine the opening he needed. The flatness in his voice is not absence of feeling. It is what feeling sounds like when there is too much of it, and it has no viable exit. He killed Mace with Mace's own moment of hesitation, the one I created." Padmé turns in her seat. She looks at him, not at the cuffs, not at the lightsaber still on his belt that Obi-Wan has not removed at him, and her face does not perform anything. It absorbs. It takes the information in, and the cost of taking it in is visible, and she does not look away. Obi-Wan says nothing. He flies. The moon slides into position on their port side, its shadow falling across their hull like a held breath. On the long-range scanner, at the outer edge of the sensor range's reliable margin, a shape separates from the background noise. Coming in from the north. Standard approach vector, exactly as called. Palpatine's shuttle. It crosses the scanner's range without deviation. No signal spike, no change in heading. The gap between their ships, measuring in distance, is 400 kilometers and closing in a direction that will bring them closest approach in approximately 40 seconds. Obi-Wan cuts the running lights. The skiff goes dark and quiet, coasting on momentum through the moon's shadow. 40 seconds of pure held breath while the shuttle's shape on the scanner moves across the screen in the trajectory of a man who does not know he is looking in the wrong direction, who does not know the platform below him will be empty, who does not yet know that the asset he spent 22 years building just boarded a ship in binders and flew east through the thermal columns while he was still calculating his approach. The shuttle passes. Obi-Wan holds course for another full minute before he breathes. Anakin in the back has been watching the scanner over Obi-Wan's shoulder the entire time. When the shuttle's shape reaches the outer edge of the screen and drops off, his eyes close. A single, long exhale. "He'll know," Anakin says quietly. "When he lands. He'll know immediately." The stars open above them as they clear the atmosphere. The skiff accelerates into hyperspace, carrying 3 people and a rearranging galaxy. And behind them, descending alone through volcanic air toward an empty platform, Darth Sidious begins to calculate. Hyperspace is blue and white, and utterly without sound. The skiff's cabin is small enough that 3 people fill it past comfort. Not physically, but in the way that 3 people carrying the specific weight these 3 are carrying fill any space past comfort. The drives hum at a frequency that settles into the back teeth after 20 minutes. The viewport is solid light. The tunnel of hyperspace travel that the brain processes as motion without being able to calculate its speed, which produces in most travelers a mild, dissociative calm. None of them are calm. Padmé has moved to the narrow bench along the port wall. She is sitting with her knees together and her hands folded and her back straight, which is the posture she was trained to hold in council chambers when the person speaking was saying something she needed to hear accurately and without the interference of her own reaction. She is using it now because it is the only tool she has left that she trusts. Obi-Wan has locked the nav computer and is sitting in the pilot's chair facing forward, not flying, nothing to fly, the chair turned 15 degrees away from Anakin's bench, in a way that is not quite deliberate and not quite accidental. His lightsaber is clipped to his belt. Anakin's is in the storage compartment above the co-pilot's seat. He put it there without being asked. The moment they cleared the atmosphere. He has not asked for it back. The cuffs are still on. Ask me something, Anakin says. He is watching Obi-Wan's profile. Obi-Wan does not turn. Something only I would know, Anakin says. Something you've never told anyone. Ask me, and I'll answer, and then you'll know whether you're sitting across from Anakin Skywalker or something wearing his face. A long beat. The drives hum. That's exactly what something wearing your face would offer, Obi-Wan says. I know. Anakin's cuffed hands shift slightly in his lap. Ask anyway. Another beat. Longer. The hyperspace light moves in the viewport and Obi-Wan's face is half lit by it, the lines of it older than they should be, older than the 40 years he has actually lived, because some kinds of exhaustion age a person faster than time does. The 5th year of your apprenticeship, Obi-Wan says, still not turning. We were stationed on Draboon. A supply mission. You were 14. There was an evening where you thought I was asleep and you sat on the edge of the landing platform for 4 hours. Alone, I watched you from the doorway for most of it. He pauses. What were you thinking about? The answer comes without hesitation. My mother, Anakin says. I'd had a dream. Not a force vision. I knew the difference by then. Mostly, just a dream. The ordinary kind, where she was in it, and when I woke up I couldn't remember her voice clearly. I could see her face, but the voice was going, and that terrified me more than anything the war had shown me so far. A breath. I was trying to reconstruct it. Sitting there on the platform, running through every memory I had of her speaking, trying to build her voice back out of the pieces. I almost had it by the 4th hour. Almost. Obi-Wan's jaw tightens once, briefly, and releases. You never told me that, he says. I know. You were asleep. Or I thought you were. The ghost of something crosses Anakin's face, not quite a smile, not quite grief, something that knows the difference between them has gotten thin. You should have told me you were watching. I would have. I don't know. It might have helped. Padmé is very still on her bench. That isn't something you could have fabricated, Obi-Wan says. He says it the way he states tactical assessments, not offering comfort, just being precise. No, Anakin agrees. It isn't proof. I know. One true memory isn't proof. Palpatine spent 20 years in a room with us. He has access to Obi-Wan. Anakin's voice is patient. Quiet, it has the specific patience of a man who has already had every version of this argument, who has, in some sense, had it for decades in a different direction, against a different kind of doubt, in the dark of a suit he will never wear now, if he can help it. I'm not going to convince you with words. I understand that. A Sith could construct any testimony I could offer. I know that. You know that. He leans forward slightly, as much as the cuffs allow. So stop listening to the words and do what you were trained to do. You've been doing it since the platform, and you've been refusing to trust it. Stop refusing. Silence. What I sense, Obi-Wan begins. Is real, Anakin says. Whatever you're sensing is real. I'm not projecting it. I'm not manufacturing it. I cannot manufacture it because those cuffs are cutting me off from everything active. And what you're feeling is what's left when I can't perform or suppress or reach for anything. That's just me. Underneath everything. A pause. I know what I felt like before. I know what I became. I know the difference between those two things better than anyone alive, because I lived both of them. Obi-Wan turns in the chair. He looks at Anakin directly for the first time since the platform, not the assessing, peripheral awareness of a man keeping a dangerous subject in his sightline, but actually looks. The way you look at something when you are prepared to let it change what you know. What he sees is Anakin Skywalker at 22 years old with 20 years of additional weight distributed through his posture, his eyes, the specific stillness of his hands that has never been Anakin's stillness before, because Anakin Skywalker has never once in his life been still. Tell me, Obi-Wan says. Not a demand, not even quite a question. An opening, offered the way you offer a door, not pushing through it, just making it available. Anakin tells him, not everything, not the architecture of the whole, Not Alderaan, not the twins, not the full scope of what 20 years of the Empire costs the galaxy in bodies and light. He chooses the pieces that are his own to carry, and he lays them down one by one, flat and undecorated, in the order they happened. The night Palpatine told him about Plagueis and immortality and saving the ones you love from death. The dream of Padmé on the table, the one that had been running for months, the one he had fed and watered in the dark like something that needed tending. The window. Mace, the split second of decision that was not a decision because it had already been made weeks before the moment arrived, built from fear in increments small enough that none of them seemed like building. The temple. He does not linger on the temple. He says it plain and moves past it because there is no way to say it that is better than plain, and lingering does not make a thing more true. Padmé's hands are pressed hard against each other in her lap. When I woke up, Anakin says, and here his voice does something, not breaks, but changes frequency slightly, goes to a register that is lower and costs more, on the platform. When it hit me, the first thing I felt was her. He does not look at Padmé when he says it. He looks at his cuffed hands, not the future version, the version standing 20 meters away from me at the top of the ramp. I could feel her in the Force before the cuffs went on, and what I felt was, she was afraid. But she came anyway. She crossed the galaxy afraid, his hands close around each other, slowly, the cuffs clicking softly. I raised my hand toward her. In the other life, I raised my hand toward her and He stops. He breathes through his nose once. Measured. I put it down, he says. That's what I want you to understand. I put it down. The hyperspace tunnel moves in the viewport. Steady, bright, indifferent. Obi-Wan looks at him for a long moment. At the hands. At the face. At whatever the Force is telling him through the sensation of sitting in close proximity to a man whose presence has the quality of water that has been through fire and is somehow still water. He reaches into his belt pouch. He takes out the small activation chip for the inhibitor cuffs. He holds it in his palm for a moment, looking at it, and then he closes his fingers around it and puts it back, but slower, this time, and with less certainty in the set of his jaw. It is not trust. It is not absolution. It is not even the beginning of either of those things. It is a door, held fractionally open, by a man who has not yet decided whether he is brave enough or foolish enough to walk through it. The drives hum. The stars stream. Padmé breathes. Polis Massa is a wound in space. The asteroid facility hangs in the belt like something the galaxy forgot to finish, gray and porous and lightless on the outside, carved into habitable chambers on the inside by Caladan archaeologists who came looking for the remains of a dead civilization and stayed long enough to become one themselves. The corridors are narrow. The ceilings are low. The lighting runs on a spectrum tuned to Caladan eyesight, which means it is perpetually the color of early morning in a room where no morning has ever occurred. The medbay is at the facility's core. It is not a large room. It was not designed for what is happening in it. Padmé has been in labor for 6 hours. The Caladan medics work in their particular silence. They are not a species given to speech, communicate in a register largely beneath human hearing, and move through the medbay with the specific, unhurried efficiency of people who have decided that panic is a resource expenditure they cannot afford. They have seen difficult births. They have not seen this particular configuration of difficult, which includes one patient in active labor, one former Jedi in restraint cuffs sitting against the wall because there is nowhere else to put him, and one current Jedi standing in the doorway because he cannot make himself leave and cannot make himself fully enter. Obi-Wan is in the doorway. He has been in the doorway for 2 hours. He has his arms crossed and his shoulder against the frame and his eyes on Padmé, monitoring her the way he monitors a battlefield, constantly, for changes, ready to respond to something he has no capacity to respond to. He is not a medic. He is not able to do anything useful here. He stays anyway, because leaving would be worse, and because the alternative is standing in a corridor outside, while the 2 people he has known longest in the galaxy are in a room he cannot bring himself to abandon. Anakin is watching Padmé's face. He has not moved from the wall since the medics positioned him there and indicated, in the wordless Kalidahin way, that this was where he should remain. He is sitting with his back against the gray stone and his cuffed hands in his lap and his eyes on her, and he is doing something with his face that requires visible effort, keeping it neutral, keeping it present, not letting it show the particular horror of a man who has watched this scene play out before, in memory. In the version where the room looked different, and the outcome was not this. In the other life, she died here. Not in labor, not exactly. Later, after, in a sequence of events that he was the primary architect of, on a table in this same facility with medics, who could find nothing physically wrong, and the force bleeding out of her like a wound they couldn't locate. He had been told, later, in the suit, in the dark, that she died of a broken heart, and he had never examined that explanation closely, because examining it closely required examining what broke it. He examines it now, in this room, with nothing else available to him. The knowledge sits in his chest like a coal, not burning, too old now for burning, just present, and dense, and hot in the specific way of something that has been there long enough to become structural. She came to Mustafar to reach him. She came afraid, and came anyway. Anakin, her voice, between contractions, finds him across the room. She has been looking at the ceiling mostly, focusing on it, using it as a fixed point the way pilots use the horizon. But now her head turns and her eyes find him against the wall, and what is in them is not accusation and is not forgiveness and is not any of the things he has been bracing for. It is just her. Just Padmé. Looking at him. "I'm here," he says. It is inadequate. He says it anyway. "I know." A breath. "Tell me something true." He understands what she's asking. Not facts. Not confession. Something to hold on to. "You were right," he says. "About all of it. Every time you said I was going to the wrong place for the wrong reasons. Every time you told me that fear wasn't love. You were right. I couldn't hear it." He pauses. "I hear it now." Her hand tightens on the edge of the medbay table. "That's not very comforting," she says, through gritted teeth, right at this exact moment. "No," he agrees. "Probably not. Maybe something else true. You're the bravest person I've ever known," he says. And that one is simple and immediate and costs him nothing to say, because it has been true his entire adult life, and he has been catastrophically poor at demonstrating it. "And I would like very much to be someone you can trust again. I understand if that takes time." The word comes out with a slight catch behind it. "We have time now, that's new." She looks at him for a moment longer. Then the next contraction takes her and she turns back to the ceiling. And Anakin presses his back against the gray stone and breathes. And Obi-Wan in the doorway looks at the middle distance and thinks about nothing. Very deliberately. Because thinking about something is not available to him right now without coming apart at a moment when coming apart has no place to go. The first child arrives at the 4-hour mark. The medic lifts him. Small, red-faced, indignant at the transition from one world to another, announcing his objection to it in the loud and inarticulate way of something that has opinions before it has language, and carries him to Padmé, and she takes him, and the sound she makes when she takes him is not a word. It does not need to be. Obi-Wan steps fully into the room for the first time. He does it without deciding to. His feet carry him across the threshold and he stops 3 meters from the table and looks at the child in Padmé's arms. And something in his face goes very quiet and very still. Anakin is watching from the wall. His cuffed hands are pressed together. The coal in his chest has not cooled. It will not cool for a long time, possibly ever. But something is happening adjacent to it. Something he does not have the correct word for. Something that is not relief exactly, and is not joy exactly, and is both of those things operating simultaneously in a register that the body was not designed to process cleanly. The second child arrives 20 minutes later. A girl. Quieter than her brother, she arrives with a focused, evaluating expression that the medic, who has delivered thousands of children, will mention to a colleague afterward as unlike anything she has seen. Not distressed. Attentive. already taking inventory of the room. 2 medics. 1 exhausted senator. 2 Jedi. 1 father against the wall in inhibitor cuffs. She takes the room in, this girl, and then her face does what all infant faces do, which is abandon inventory in favor of feeling, and she adds her voice to her brother's, and the sound of both of them fills the medbay and the narrow corridor beyond it, and possibly the silence of Polis Massa itself. Obi-Wan stands between the two of them with an expression that has no category because he has not been in this configuration before. With new life on one side, and Anakin Skywalker in binders on the other, and 20 years of future knowledge somewhere in the middle that he cannot fully verify and cannot fully dismiss, pressing against everything he thought he knew about how this night was going to end. He thought he was coming to Mustafar to bury his brother. He looks at the children. He looks at Padmé. He looks, finally, at Anakin. Anakin is looking at the children the way a man looks at something he did not believe he was going to be allowed to see. Not staring, absorbing, storing, making a record of the specific quality of the light in this room at this moment, the specific sound of them, the specific reality of their existence, which is new and complete and entirely indifferent to the catastrophe that surrounded their arrival. His lips move. Obi-Wan, 3 meters away, is close enough to read them. No sound comes out. Just the shapes of 2 names, formed in sequence, quiet and certain, like a man confirming coordinates he has already memorized. Luke, Leia, Obi-Wan goes very still. He has not told Anakin the names. Padmé has not spoken them aloud. No one in this room has said those names to anyone. The activation chip for the inhibitor cuffs is in his belt pouch, exactly where he put it on the skiff. He does not take it out. But his hand moves to his belt, rests there, a fraction of a second, and his eyes stay on Anakin's face. And the door that he held fractionally open on the skiff swings, in the silence of this medbay, a single, careful degree wider. The cell is on the facility's lowest level. It was not designed as a cell. It was designed as a storage room for archaeological equipment, coring tools, sample containers, cataloging arrays, and it still smells faintly of the mineral dust that those tools brought back from the asteroid's interior. A clean, ancient smell, the smell of rock that has not been exposed to atmosphere in 40,000 years. Someone has cleared the equipment out and put a cot in, and the door locks from the outside, and that is the entirety of the modification. Anakin has been in it for 9 hours. He has slept for perhaps 3 of those hours, sitting upright against the wall with his cuffed hands in his lap, because lying down on the cot with cuffed hands produces a geometry that is more uncomfortable than sitting. The sleep was not restful. It was the compressed, tactical sleep of a man whose nervous system has accepted that rest is a resource requirement and allocated the minimum viable amount. The dreams were not the ordinary kind. He is awake when the door opens. Yoda enters a room the way weather enters a room, not announcing itself, simply present. The atmosphere changed by its arrival in ways that are difficult to specify and impossible to ignore. He is carrying nothing. He is wearing the same rough-spun robe he has worn for as long as Anakin can remember, which is long enough that the robe has become less a garment and more a condition of Yoda's existence, like the Geimer stick and the ears, and the specific quality of attention that makes being looked at by him feel like being read by something that has been reading for 900 years. He looks at Anakin. Anakin, against the wall, looks back. Neither of them speaks for a moment. This is not unusual. Yoda has always been comfortable with silence in a way that Anakin spent his entire Jedi training failing to replicate, and he is not replicating it now. He is simply too tired for the performance of patience, which means what remains is something that looks, from the outside, almost like the real thing. Expected, Yoda says finally, settling onto the single low stool the room contains, to feel darkness. Expected the shadow. He tilts his head, the small, precise motion that means he is confirming something rather than discovering it. Different, you are. Changed. Yes, Anakin says. Explain this, you need not. Yoda sets his Geimer stick across his knees. Sensed it, I have, since you arrived. Sit with it, I have been. Unusual, this is. In 900 years, unusual, I'm aware I'm unusual. Something in Yoda's expression moves, not quite amusement, not quite its absence. The arrogance at least remains. It's not. Anakin stops. Considers. Maybe a little. Yoda looks at him for another long moment. Then he says, simply, show me. You want to probe my mind. Want. A strong word. Necessary. Yes, Anakin does not hesitate. All right. Resist? You will not? No. His hands shift in the cuffs, a small movement, settling. I've been carrying it alone since the platform. I would like someone else to see it. Even if, he stops again. Restarts from a more honest angle. Especially if that someone can tell me whether what I'm carrying makes me someone who should be allowed to walk out of this room. Yoda is quiet for a moment. Honest, he says. Good honesty, a beginning, it is. He reaches out. Not physically. He does not cross the 2 meters between them, does not touch the cuffs or the hands inside them. He reaches with the Force, the way Anakin has felt him reach before in training sessions and council meditations, the specific quality of Yoda's Force touch, which is nothing like a probe in the invasive sense, and nothing like a gentle inquiry in the comfortable sense. It is more like being looked at by something very old that has decided to look at all of you simultaneously. Anakin opens. He does not curate. He does not select the favorable memories or soften the edges of the unfavorable ones. He simply releases the architecture. All of it. From the moment on the platform backward and forward simultaneously, every corridor of the other life laid open to a 900-year-old mind that has seen more of the galaxy's darkness than almost any other living being. Yoda sees Order 66. His body does not move. His eyes, half closed in concentration, do not open, but something in his stillness deepens. A quality of held breath, of a being absorbing an impact without being able to fully absorb it. Clones in temple corridors. Lightsabers from behind. Masters cut down mid-sentence, mid-step, in the middle of ordinary moments that were the last ordinary moments they would ever have. Yoda sees Alderaan. He staggers. It is a small stagger, a single shift of weight on the stool, a tightening of the hands on the Geimer stick, something that in a lesser being would not be visible at all. In Yoda it is the equivalent of a cry. He steadies himself without sound, without comment, and continues looking. He sees the suit, the breathing, the decades of it, the specific texture of existing inside a body that is more machine than organism, serving a master whose instructions Anakin carried out in the cold, efficient manner of a man who has converted grief entirely into function, because function is the only thing that does not require feeling. He sees Luke. Here Yoda goes still in a different way. Not the stillness of impact, but the stillness of recognition, of a being encountering something it understands at a level below language. A son reaching for his father in the dark. A father choosing, for the first time, the thing that costs him everything, and is still worth it. He sees Endor. He sees the mask come off. He sees the face. He withdraws. The room reassembles itself around them, the mineral smell, the cot, the locked door, the low ceiling. Anakin blinks once, the way you blink when you return to a body you have briefly vacated. Yoda sits on the stool and looks at the middle distance with the expression of a being who has just lived 20 years in the span of 4 minutes and is conducting a quiet, private inventory of what that cost him. Neither of them speaks for a long time. The younglings, Yoda says finally. His voice is different. Not broken, Yoda does not break, but lower, carrying more. Yes, Anakin says. You're doing. Yes, silence, Alderaan, Yoda says. I didn't. I gave the order. I didn't fire the weapon. That distinction, he stops. That distinction means nothing. I know that. No, Yoda agrees quietly. Nothing, it means. Another silence. Longer, Anakin does not fill it. He has earned the right to nothing here. No defense, no context, no explanation that would make the numbers smaller. He waits. Ask me something, Yoda says. You came here to do. Anakin looks at him directly. I don't ask forgiveness, Master Yoda. The words are flat and deliberate. chosen the way you choose words when you have been preparing them for hours and want to be certain they carry the correct weight, and nothing additional. I ask only that you let me undo what I can before you end it." Yoda looks at him for a long time. What passes across the old face in that time is not simple. It is not compassion, not quite, or rather, it is compassion moving through the kind of accounting that compassion is rarely required to move through. Pressed against the specific arithmetic of what Anakin has shown him, all those names, all those deaths, and emerging on the other side is something that is not absolution, and is not its absence. "Cheap," Yoda says. "Your death would be." Anakin blinks. Die now, and the debt, unchanged. The harm, unchanged. The Empire, unchanged. Yoda shifts the Geimer stick on his knees. A small, deliberate movement. Dead men, atone, cannot. Live, you must. And earn, every day, what you ask of the galaxy. The words land with the weight of a sentence and the weight of a gift simultaneously. Anakin closes his eyes. "Suffer, you have," Yoda says. His voice has gone quieter. Not softer, quieter, which in Yoda is a form of emphasis. "Still, suffer, you will. This, I cannot spare you, would not, even if I could. But the suffering, useful now, it can be. Directed, in service of the undoing." He stands, which takes a moment, the careful redistribution of ancient weight. "Begin, you may, with staying alive. Difficult enough, that will." He crosses to the door. He does not knock. He does not signal. He simply stops, his hand on the edge of the frame, and looks back at Anakin with the expression of a being who has made a decision and is aware of the full cost of it, and has made it anyway. "Master Yoda," Anakin says. Yoda waits. "In the other life. Did you know? Before the end. Did you know I was still in there?" The old face does not give him the reassurance he is not asking for. "Hoped," Yoda says. "Always hoped," he leaves. The door does not close all the way behind him. The gap is small, 2 centimeters, perhaps 3. Enough to see the faint light of the corridor. Enough that the room is no longer, technically, a cell. Anakin looks at the gap for a long time. He does not move toward it. He sits with his cuffed hands in his lap and his back against the wall and the mineral smell of the old rock around him, and he breathes, and the breathing is enough for now. It has to be enough. It is. Bail Organa does not frighten easily. He has sat across negotiating tables from men who considered assassination a legitimate diplomatic tool. He has smuggled relief supplies through blockades that were enforced with turbolaser batteries. He has looked Palpatine in the face in the Senate chamber, knowing what he knew, and maintained the expression of a loyal senator because the alternative was useless, and the rebellion needed him alive more than it needed him righteous. He frightens now. Not of Anakin, or not only of Anakin, though the cuffs are gone from this meeting. Yoda's decision, a dial turned fractionally toward trust. But of what Anakin is saying, which is precise and specific, and delivered at a speed that suggests the man across the table from him has been organizing this information for a very long time, in a place where organization was the only available activity. They are in a back room of the Organa safe house on Coruscant's lower levels, 3 weeks after Polis Massa. The room has no windows. It has a table, 4 chairs, a data terminal that is not connected to any network Palpatine's people know about, and a single overhead light that turns everything it touches a flat institutional white. Obi-Wan is in the 3rd chair. Mon Mothma is in the 4th. She arrived an hour ago, brought by Bail with the explanation that she needed to hear this directly, that second-hand accounts of what Anakin Skywalker was offering were insufficient for what she was being asked to risk. She has not spoken since Anakin began. She is taking notes on a datapad in a shorthand, so compressed it is essentially a personal cipher. And her face is the face of a woman performing the continuous calculation of what this information costs against what it could save. Anakin talks. The clone inhibitor chips. He begins. Because that is the most immediate emergency, and he has learned, from 20 years of managing emergencies, to lead with the most immediate. Every clone trooper currently serving in the Grand Army has one. implanted at growth stage, in the hypothalamus, keyed to a specific command frequency. When Palpatine transmits Order 66, and he will within the next 48 hours, possibly sooner, every clone in the field will execute their Jedi commanders simultaneously. Without warning. Without hesitation. The chip overrides volition. They won't know they're doing it until it's done. Mon Mothma's pen has stopped moving. How many Jedi are currently in the field, she says. It is not quite a question. Enough that Order 66 ends the order, Anakin says. Whatever survives will be individuals. Scattered, hunted, Palpatine will spend the next 2 decades finding them and killing them with a group he'll call the Inquisitorius. Former Jedi or Force sensitives taken, broken, and turned into hunters. The architecture for it is already in place. It needs only survivors to fill it. The room is very quiet. The chip frequency, Bale says. Can it be blocked? Jammed at the source? No. The transmission goes out on a Republic emergency channel with a priority override that would take more authority than we currently have to intercept. But the chips themselves can be deactivated individually. Surgical removal is an option for individual troopers, if they consent, and if you can get to them before the order goes out. He pauses. There's another option. Slower, harder to execute, but wider in its reach. A virus. Introduced into the Kaminoan growth facility's central network. It can propagate a deactivation signal through the chip's own maintenance frequency, the one the Kaminoans use for routine chip diagnostics. It reaches every chip that's ever been synced to that network. All of them. Galaxy-wide. Obi-Wan, who has been very still in the third chair, says, "You know how to write that virus. It is not a question either. I know what it needs to do," Anakin says. I know the architecture of the Kaminoan network, because I spent time there during the Clone Wars, and because Palpatine showed me, later, the technical specifications as a demonstration of how completely he had engineered the contingency. He was proud of it. Something crosses Anakin's face that is not quite any single emotion. He showed me a great many things. He considered me an investment worth maintaining. Bale absorbs this. What else, he says. They go for 4 hours. Anakin does not use notes. He does not need them. The information is organized in his memory the way tactical intelligence is organized in the memory of someone who spent 20 years as the primary enforcement instrument of a galaxy-spanning authoritarian government, by category, by urgency, by the specific weight of what it costs to know it and what it costs not to. Scarif, he says at the 90-minute mark. There is a planetary defense installation in the Scarif system. Palpatine will use it as a data vault, the primary storage site for Imperial military research, including the plans for a battle station he has been developing since before the Clone Wars. The station is called the Death Star. In 19 years it will matter more than anything else on this list. Start protecting against it now. Mon Mothma looks up from her datapad. A battle station, she says. Capable of destroying a planet, Anakin says without inflection. I have watched it happen. The room does not respond to this immediately. It absorbs it the way rooms absorb information that is too large for the space. Slowly, in stages, the full shape of it arriving in pieces, because the whole thing at once is not processable. Bale sets his hands flat on the table. You speak, he says, like a man reading a book that hasn't been written. I know. Anakin looks at him directly. I understand how this sounds. I understand that everything I'm telling you requires you to trust a man who has given you no rational basis for trust, and who was, 3 weeks ago, Palpatine's primary instrument of violence. He does not look away. I'm asking you to verify what you can, where you can, and act on the rest as a calculated risk. The cost of disbelieving me and being wrong is measured in planets. Mon Mothma puts down her pen. The Inquisitorius, she says. You mentioned former Jedi. Can you give us names? Anakin is quiet for a moment. Some, he says. Not all. Some I don't know until they're already deployed, and by then, the damage is. He stops. When he speaks again, it is from a more controlled angle, the tactical compression he uses when the personal cost of a topic threatens to interfere with the information's delivery. Every name I give you is someone I knew. Someone I trained with, or served alongside, or failed to reach. It doesn't get easier. He glances at Obi-Wan. It doesn't get easier. Obi-Wan meets his eyes. I know, Obi-Wan says quietly. At the 3-hour mark, Mon Mothma steps out to make a communication on a channel she doesn't identify. She returns 7 minutes later and resumes her seat and does not explain the call, which means it went the way she needed it to go. At the 4-hour mark, Bail calls a pause. He refills the water glasses from a pitcher on the side table with the careful, deliberate movements of a man who needs 30 seconds of ordinary physical activity to process what the previous 4 hours have put in him. He sets Anakin's glass in front of him. He does not set it at arm's length. He sets it close, the way you set a glass in front of someone at your own table. It is a small thing. Anakin looks at it for a moment before he picks it up. The cells, Bail says, returning to his chair. If we begin seeding them now, ahead of the timeline you've described, we have what? 19 years before the battle station is operational. 18, Anakin says. 17 if the Geonosian construction crews aren't interrupted. Then we interrupt them, Mon Mothma says. It is the first decisive statement she has made in 4 hours, and it lands in the room with the weight of a woman who, when she makes decisions, makes them fully. Bail looks at her. Then at Anakin. Where do we start, he says. Anakin sets down the water glass. Lothal, he says. There's a garrison there that doesn't know yet it's been chosen for something larger. And there are people on that planet, a family, currently, who are going to matter a great deal to what comes next, if we can get to them before the Empire does. He begins talking again. The data pad fills. The night deepens around the safe house on Coruscant's lower levels. Somewhere above them, in the executive district, in a throne that has been occupied for exactly 3 weeks. Palpatine is building his empire from the same intelligence this room is being used to dismantle. In a sub-district safe house with no windows and one overhead light, the first true rebel cell activates, years ahead of any schedule the Empire will ever calculate for it. The light burns all night. Kamino does not stop raining. This is not weather in any sense that a planet with variable atmospheric conditions would recognize. It is a permanent state, the ocean world's baseline condition, the thing Kamino does instead of having seasons or mornings or any of the ordinary rhythms that terrestrial planets use to divide time into manageable units. The rain comes from every direction simultaneously, driven horizontal by winds that have been building momentum across thousands of kilometers of open ocean before they arrive at the cloning facility's transparent steel walls and spend themselves against the glass in long, shuddering gusts. The facility hums. Everything on Kamino hums. The growth tanks, the environmental systems, the nutrient feeds cycling through thousands of chambers, where thousands of men are being assembled from a single template, at a rate the Republic calls efficient and Anakin calls what it is, which is the organized manufacture of people who did not ask to exist, and were not asked what they wanted to become. He knows what they became. He knows what he made them do. They came in on a supply freighter, Obi-Wan's idea, his execution, a clean piece of operational planning that Anakin noted with the private recognition of a man who spent 20 years watching Obi-Wan Kenobi work and never fully stopped being impressed by it. Forged manifests, a cargo hold full of legitimate protein supplement containers that an actual supply run had been rerouted to provide, and a contact inside the facility's logistics division who owed Bail Organa a debt large enough that it bent her cooperation without breaking her conscience. They are inside. Obi-Wan is on overwatch at the junction of corridors G7 and G8, which gives him sightlines on the 2 primary approaches to the server room and a tertiary exit route through a maintenance shaft that Anakin mapped from memory before they landed. He is dressed in the gray coveralls of a Kaminoan facility technician, which fits poorly because he is the wrong species and the wrong height, and the coveralls were designed for beings with a significantly different center of gravity. He is wearing them with the particular dignity of a man who has worn worse in worse circumstances and intends to make this work. He watches the corridor. He does not watch Anakin. He does not need to. He can feel him through the Force, 2 rooms away, moving with the specific efficient quietness of someone who has done this, or something sufficiently like this before. The Force signature is warm and focused, and carries none of the frantic edge that Anakin's presence used to carry in high-stakes situations. The old burning bright quality that made him feel, to Force-sensitive observers, like a star about to go supernova. This is different. Controlled, purposeful, Obi-Wan finds this more unsettling and more reassuring than he has words for. The server room is cold. Kaminoans run their data infrastructure at a temperature that their biological systems find comfortable and human biological systems find hostile, which means Anakin is working in air that sits at approximately 8 degrees and smells of ozone, and the particular sterile quality of spaces that are cleaned by automated systems on a cycle so regular that no organic smell has been able to establish itself in years. His hands remember the interface. This is the part he did not explain to Obi-Wan in detail, because explaining it in detail would have required explaining the specific way that Palpatine used to send him here, after the war, after the suit, on maintenance visits that were framed as inspections and were actually demonstrations of ownership. "Look at what I built," the visit said. "Look at the mechanism. You are part of the mechanism. The mechanism works. He knows every panel in this room. He pulls up the diagnostic subsystem, the maintenance frequency, the channel the Kaminoans use to run routine checks on the inhibitor chips currently installed in clone troopers across the galaxy. It is not a weapons system. It is not flagged, monitored, or defended with the same priority as the primary command channels. Because it is boring. It is maintenance. Nobody attacks maintenance." He begins to write the virus. His hands are shaking. Not from cold, or not only from cold. The shake is finer than temperature, seated in something below the wrist, in the specific way that hands shake when they are being asked to carry more than their mechanical function. He notices it and does not try to stop it. Stopping it would require redirecting attention he cannot spare. "They didn't choose this," he says, very quietly. "To the room. To no one." He keeps typing. "Not one of them. I can't undo the men I killed. I can at least undo this." The interface accepts the first module. The virus is not elegant. It does not need to be elegant. It needs to be complete. It needs to reach every chip that has ever synced to this network and deliver a single, clean deactivation signal that the chip will interpret as a maintenance command, because it is structured to look exactly like one. He built the architecture for this in the safe house on Coruscant over 6 days, with Mon Mothma's slicer verifying each module and Bail watching over his shoulder with the expression of a man who is choosing, deliberately and repeatedly, to trust something his instincts are still processing. The second module loads. You still fly through code like it's a dogfight. Obi-Wan's voice, through the comlink in his ear, low, warm, carrying the specific tone of a man who is making an observation because the observation is true, and because making it feels, right now, like something he is permitted to do. A normal thing. A brotherly thing. The kind of remark that belongs to a version of them that existed before everything, and is apparently, improbably, painfully, beginning to exist again. Anakin's hands slow for exactly 1 second. "You can see me from there? I can feel you from here." A pause. You always had a tell. When you're working something complex, your presence in the Force becomes rhythmic, aggressive inputs, corrections, aggressive inputs, like watching someone fly through a debris field. That's a terrible habit. Yes, Obi-Wan agrees. I spent 3 years trying to train it out of you. It didn't work. Evidently not. Another pause. Softer. It's good to feel. Anakin. Whatever else is true. Anakin looks at the screen. He does not have a word for what that costs him to hear, and what it gives him simultaneously. He files it somewhere that is not accessible right now, and keeps working. The third module loads. The fourth. The virus is taking shape in the system the way a proper solution takes shape, not forced, but found. Each piece locating its correct position relative to the others, until the whole thing has the specific internal logic of something that was always going to be this shape, that could not have been any other shape. The fifth module. He thinks about CT-7567. Captain Rex. A man who was more than his chip allowed him to be. more than his programming anticipated, who found his way to resistance through sheer force of personhood in a timeline where the chip was never removed. In the other life, Rex survived because someone reached him in time. Most of them didn't have a Rex. Most of them had nobody. The 6th module. He thinks about the temple. He does not think about it for long. He cannot afford to. Not here. Not with the interface active and the clock running and Obi-Wan on Overwatch 2 rooms away depending on his focus. He thinks about it for exactly the amount of time it takes to acknowledge that the thinking is happening, and then he redirects it into the work, into each keystroke, into the specific intention behind each line of code, which is, not again, never again, not one more of them. The 7th module loads. The interface processes. On the screen, a progress indicator, Kaminoan aesthetic, clean and angular and utterly indifferent to what it is measuring, climbs toward completion with the slow, mechanical patience of a system doing exactly what it was designed to do, entirely unaware of what it is actually doing. Anakin watches it climb. At 83%, a patrol indicator appears in his peripheral display, a guard rotation 2 corridors away, ahead of schedule by 4 minutes. He flags it on Obi-Wan's channel without speaking. Obi-Wan responds with a single click, which means, acknowledged, handled, keep working. At 91%, the cold in the room finds the back of his neck, and he becomes aware, suddenly and completely, that he is afraid. Not of the guard, not of discovery, of completion, of what happens in the moment after the indicator reaches 100, when the signal propagates and reaches every chip in every clone trooper currently serving across the galaxy. And the thing he is trying to undo either undoes itself or it doesn't. At 97%, he stops breathing. 100. The interface goes quiet. No alarm. No confirmation. The system simply accepts it, processes it, routes it through the diagnostic frequency the way it routes every other maintenance command, because that is what it looks like, because that is what it was built to look like. Somewhere across the galaxy, on a transport above Mandalore, in a forward operating base on the Outer Rim, in a barracks on Coruscant, clone troopers blink. A shift. Small, internal, something in the hypothalamus that was wound tight going slack, like a spring released so gradually that the mechanism didn't register the change until the tension was already gone. Most of them don't know what happened. One of them does. He is standing in a corridor on a mid-rim garrison world with his blaster raised at a Jedi Knight, who is not yet aware she is about to die. Because the order came in 6 minutes ago, and he has been walking toward her for 6 minutes, with the chip driving every step, and the part of him underneath the chip screaming in a room with no doors. The chip goes dark. He stops. The blaster is still in his hands. The Jedi is 8 meters ahead, her back to him, unaware. He looks at the weapon in his hands. He looks at her. He lowers the blaster. He stands in the corridor for a long time with his arms at his sides, and the specific horror of a man who has just returned to himself in the middle of an action he cannot reverse, and did not choose, and is, by the margin of 6 minutes and 1 virus, not going to be able to say he completed. He sits down on the floor. The Jedi turns at the sound of it, sees him, sees his face. She keeps her hand near her lightsaber, but she does not ignite it, because what is on his face is not a threat. What is on his face is what it looks like when a person wakes up. In the server room on Kamino, Anakin Skywalker takes the first full breath he has taken in 8 minutes. He closes the interface. He puts his hands flat on the console and stays there for a moment with his head bowed and the cold of the room around him, and the hum of the facility, and the rain on the glass, and the knowledge, not comfort, not absolution, not anything that simple, that somewhere in the galaxy a man lowered a weapon. One man. Today, one man. It is not enough. It will never be enough, but it is one more than yesterday, and that has to mean something. He taps the comlink. It's done, he says. Obi-Wan's response comes back immediately. Then let's go home. Palpatine finds the anomaly on a Tuesday. This is not how he thinks of it. He does not think in days of the week the way ordinary beings do, does not organize time by the arbitrary calendar divisions that the Senate adopted from the core world's agricultural cycles. He thinks in sequences, in chains of cause and effect that he has been constructing and maintaining for decades. Each link forged with the specific patience of a man who learned from his master that the only timeline that matters is the one that ends with absolute power, and that absolute power, properly constructed, is worth any duration of waiting. He is not waiting anymore. He is emperor. The Senate applauded. The Jedi are broken, scattered, hunted. Their temple a ruin on Coruscant's skyline that he has already commissioned architects to repurpose. His apprentice was, the instrument that was supposed to consolidate everything, the raw power of Anakin Skywalker housed in a suit and pointed at every remaining obstacle, he sits at the desk in the Imperial Executive Office. Palpatine's office, now truly his. The democratic pretense finally stripped from it, and he examines the intelligence report for the fourth time this morning, with the expression of a man who does not believe in coincidence, and is therefore treating this as what it is. The clone chips stopped working. Not all of them. Not at once. A cascade, a propagating deactivation signal moving through the diagnostic maintenance frequency, which means someone with access to the Kaminoan central network introduced it there, which means the infiltration of Kamino was not detected by his security systems, which means his security systems have a gap he was not informed about. Someone with old clearance codes, someone who knows the architecture of his infrastructure from the inside. He sets the report down with a careful, deliberate motion that contains none of what he is actually feeling, because what he is actually feeling is not an appropriate thing to allow into his face in a building full of people who are watching him for fluctuations. He thinks about Mustafar. He has thought about Mustafar every day for 2 months. The platform, the empty platform, the absence of an apprentice, and the absence of a senator, and the absence of a Jedi who should have been there. Because he tracked Kenobi's presence through the Force across the journey to Mustafar and felt him land, and then nothing. Departure. All 3 of them. Gone. Before he arrived. In a window he calculated as sufficient for a full duel, they had instead left. Anakin chose to leave. He has known this since the moment he stepped off his shuttle onto the empty platform and felt the Force signature of what had happened there. Not a duel, not a death, but a surrender. The specific quality of power deliberately set aside. He has been waiting for the confirmation of what it meant, and here it is, in a security report about cloning facilities. And what it means is that somewhere in the galaxy, Anakin Skywalker is operating with 20 years of knowledge about the exact infrastructure of an empire he helped build, and is dismantling it with the specific, systematic efficiency of a man who has nothing left to lose and a very clear idea of where the load-bearing walls are. He reaches for the comlink. The Inquisitor who answers to the name Second Sister has been in the Imperial service for 7 months. She was, before that, a Jedi Padawan, one who was not simply captured and offered a choice, but one who was given up. Her master broke under interrogation and gave her name to the Empire, and what the Inquisitorius built from her afterward was constructed on that specific foundation, not the fear of death, but the calcified knowledge of abandonment. The betrayal is not incidental to who she became, it is the load-bearing wall of it. She is standing in the anteroom of the executive office, and she is very still, and she is working to maintain the specific quality of stillness that the Emperor seems to prefer in his subordinates, which is not relaxed stillness, but ready stillness. The stillness of a weapon at rest that is aware it may be required at any moment. The Kamino infiltration, Palpatine says. He does not look up from the desk. Someone with old clearance codes is unmaking my army from the inside. Find them. Burn the nest. She does not ask for clarification. Clarification is not something the Emperor offers, and requesting it produces outcomes she has learned to avoid. There is a medical outpost, he continues, in the Outer Rim Atollon sector, unmarked. Operating under a shell registration that traces through 4 corporate intermediaries to a Chandrilan shipping company with Senate connections. He pauses. Senator Organa's connections. Specifically, he looks up. His eyes in the office light are the color of old amber and contain approximately the warmth of old amber as well. The shell registration is very good. I almost missed it. Almost, he says the word with the precise inflection of a being for whom almost is not a description of near failure but a description of the interval between identification and consequence. I would like you to take 3 Star Destroyers, he says. I would like you to arrive unannounced. I would like whatever is in that outpost to not be in it anymore. He returns to the report. You may begin immediately. Second sister leaves. The door closes. Palpatine sits alone in the executive office for a moment with the intelligence report and the silence and the specific calculation he has been running since Mustafar, which is this: Anakin Skywalker alive and in opposition is a more significant threat than any Jedi who survived Order 66, because he is not operating from ignorance. He knows the codes. He knows the infrastructure. He knows the contingencies and the fallbacks and the secondary systems and the identities of every asset Palpatine has spent 30 years placing in positions of influence. He also knows, Palpatine reflects, that the Emperor will not send a conventional force to find him. He will send something that knows how he thinks. He reaches for a second comlink. The outpost on Atalon is not designed for beauty. It is designed for not being found, which means it is built into a rock formation on a plateau above a sea of Krykna-populated screwblend, camouflaged from aerial observation by a sensor-scattering array that Anakin specified and Bale's engineers built in 3 weeks, and accessible by 2 ground routes and 1 air corridor that requires precise knowledge of the sensor gap to navigate without triggering the array's passive alarm system. It has been home, for 6 weeks, to 43 people. 11 are Jedi survivors, Masters and Knights, and 2 Padawans who made it off their respective postings when the clones stopped and then, in the chaos of the confusion that followed, were pulled toward the signal that Obi-Wan had been broadcasting on a frequency derived from Qui-Gon's private meditation wavelength, which no one outside his lineage would recognize, and which Anakin had remembered, specifically and correctly, at 3 in the morning in the safe house on Coruscant, sitting straight up from the half-sleep he had been managing, and told Obi-Wan to use. The rest are crew, medics, Bale's people, 2 of Mon Mothma's staffers who technically resigned their Senate positions on a medical pretext. Padmé is here. She is in the small room at the outpost's eastern end that has the best light. Not good light. The outpost does not have good light, but the best available, writing the communications that are not supposed to exist between a sitting senator and a network of people the Emperor would like very much to arrest. The twins are in the room adjacent, in the care of a Kaladahin medic who came with them from Polis Massa and has not left since, out of what appears to be a combination of professional commitment and personal attachment to 2 children who have done nothing yet except exist and be extremely opinionated about it. Anakin is in the operations room when the alarm sounds, not the passive array, the long-range scanner, the one monitoring the hyperspace approach vectors, the one he insisted on configuring himself because he knew, from 20 years of deploying Imperial forces, exactly which vectors a search fleet would use if it knew the general region, but not the precise coordinates. He looks at the scanner. 3 signatures, Star Destroyers, dropping from hyperspace at the outer system boundary, which means they do not have the precise coordinates, yet, but are close enough that the time between now and triangulation is measured in minutes, not hours. He hits the alert. The outpost comes alive in the specific way of a place that has been drilling for this, not chaos, not panic. The disciplined urgency of people who have rehearsed the evacuation sequence enough times that their bodies know the route before their minds catch up. Doors, corridors. The transport bay where 3 ships are being prepped simultaneously. Obi-Wan is beside him in 30 seconds. He looks at the scanner. He looks at Anakin. How long? He says. 7 minutes before they have the coordinates. 4 more before they're in atmosphere. Anakin is already moving toward the transport bay. The civilians first. Padmé and the children on the first ship, Bale's staff on the second. We hold the third. For what? For anyone who doesn't make the first 2. Obi-Wan does not argue. This is the version of Anakin that Obi-Wan has been slowly, incrementally learning to trust. The one who leads with the people who need protecting, rather than with the objective that needs achieving. The sequencing is different from what it was. The instinct has been rebuilt in a different order. He follows. In the transport bay, Padmé is already moving. She has the twins in a carry configuration that the Kaladahan medic apparently taught her, one on each side. Both asleep in the specific impervious way of very young children who have not yet developed the threat assessment instinct that would make sleep impossible in a situation like this. They are warm and unaware, and entirely dependent on the speed of the adults around them. Anakin meets her in the corridor outside the bay. He stops. She stops. There is no time. They both know there is no time. The scanner is running in his head on a countdown that does not pause for anything, and she can read it in his face with the specific accuracy of a person who has been reading his face for years. She steps forward and puts her free hand against his jaw for exactly 2 seconds. "Go," she says. He goes. The first transport clears the plateau and pushes for atmosphere. In the operations room that is now empty of everything except the equipment they couldn't move in time, and the alerts they are no longer there to answer, the long-range scanner registers the Imperial fleet completing its triangulation. The coordinates lock. Above the Atollon Plateau, 3 Star Destroyers drop through the cloud layer with the specific, indifferent enormity of things that were built to make other things feel small. The outpost is below them. Abandoned, still warm from the people who were just inside it. 11 seconds later, the first turbolaser bolt hits the rock. In the upper atmosphere, 3 transports push for space, for the hyperspace window that Anakin calculated before the alarm sounded. Because he has been calculating it since the day they arrived. Because he has never once, in 20 years of war in either direction, allowed himself to be in a position without a calculated exit. The 3rd transport is the last one through. He is on it. The stars streak and elongate and the blue of hyperspace swallows them, and behind them, shrinking to nothing. 3 Star Destroyers hang above a burning plateau, and the Emperor's net closes around the space where 43 people used to be. Empty. Again. The lightsaber is white. Not the white of something bleached or drained, not the absence of color, not the gray of a thing that has lost its nature. This is the white of something that has been through fire hot enough to burn away everything impure and emerged on the other side still itself. Clarified. The color of a conviction that has been tested at temperature and held. Obi-Wan holds it out without ceremony. They are in the transport's cargo hold, 3 hours into hyperspace, and the hold smells of coolant and the particular mineral dust that follows them everywhere from Atollon, and the overhead lighting is functional rather than pleasant, and none of this is how either of them imagined this moment. Anakin does not think he imagined it at all, because imagining it required a confidence about the future that he has not permitted himself since Polis Massa. The hilt is plain. No ornamentation. A grip wrapped in simple cord. A focusing crystal that Obi-Wan sourced through a contact neither of them will name, purified over 3 days by a process Anakin was not present for, but the result of which he can feel from a meter away. The specific resonance of a kyber crystal that has been listened to rather than forced. That is singing now in a register that corresponds exactly to nothing that came before. "It's not your old one," Obi-Wan says. "No," Anakin agrees. "It shouldn't be." Anakin takes it. The weight is different from what he remembers, from either memory, the blue of his Padawan years or the red of the decades after. This sits in his hand with the specific balance of something made for what he is now, rather than what he was. And what he is now is a thing he is still in the process of understanding, still mapping the edges of, still learning to inhabit without flinching. He ignites it. White, clean, steady. He holds it for a moment and then deactivates it, and clips it to his belt, and looks at Obi-Wan with the expression of a man who has a great many things to say, and is aware that none of them are adequate, and is choosing, therefore, to say the one that is most true. "Thank you," he says. Obi-Wan nods once, the small, precise nod of a man receiving something he does not know how to hold gracefully and is declining to pretend otherwise. The transport drops from hyperspace 40 minutes later, above a moon the Empire does not have flagged, in a system that Anakin named from memory and that does not appear on any Imperial chart, because he personally redacted it from the cartographic database 3 years into his tenure as Vader, for reasons he no longer remembers and is now grateful for. The rendezvous is already there. 11 Jedi and 4 ships, the survivors of the Atollon evacuation who took the alternate hyperspace route that Anakin calculated as the secondary exit. Longer, less direct, and for that reason less likely to be covered by whatever search pattern the Inquisitorius deploys in the aftermath of the outpost's destruction. They are all here. All 11. He counts them through the viewport before they land. He counts them twice. The moon is cold and gray, and covered in a low, tough scrubland that does not flower and does not change, and does not care about the ships landing in its one flat valley, and the air smells of frozen soil and something mineral underneath it. The deep, cold smell of a world that has never been warm enough to fully forget winter. The Jedi are waiting on the ground. Anakin knows most of their faces. Some of them he knows from the Clone Wars, commanders, generals, people he served beside on campaigns that feel, from where he stands now, like they happened to someone else in a story he was told about, rather than a life he lived. Some of them he knows from the temple, from the years before the war, from the specific geography of a childhood spent in corridors and training rooms, and meditation gardens that are ash now. Some of them know what he was. All of them know what he did. He lands and comes down the ramp and walks toward them and does not look anywhere except at what is in front of him. Because looking away would be a kind of performance, and he is done performing. A woman in the front, Master Luminara Unduli, who he has known since he was a Padawan, and who is looking at him with an expression that is not warmth and is not hostility, and is something more demanding than either, which is assessment, says, simply, Skywalker. Master Unduli, he says, a beat. She looks at him. The Force moves between them the way it moves between any two sensitive beings in close proximity. Information, not words, the specific quality of a person's presence conveying what their face is disciplined enough to withhold. She steps aside. It is not forgiveness. It is not welcome. It is a door open to the minimum necessary width, which is, right now, exactly what he deserves and exactly what he needs. He walks through it. The Inquisitors arrive 6 hours later. 3 of them, which means Palpatine took the destruction of the outpost as confirmation rather than conclusion. The fleet is gone, already repositioned. But the hunters he sent are still running the trail, and the trail led here because Anakin made an error in the secondary hyperspace route calculation that he did not catch until the scanner showed the incoming signatures, and the math became undeniable. He made an error. He sits with this for exactly the time it takes him to accept it, which is 3 seconds. And then he moves. The valley is narrow. This is an advantage and a disadvantage simultaneously. It channels the Inquisitors toward a single approach, which is good. And it limits the Jedi's lateral movement, which is less good. Anakin maps it in the 3 minutes between the scanner alert and the Inquisitors' ships touching down, and the map produces one viable defensive configuration, which he communicates to Obi-Wan in 12 words, and to the assembled Jedi in 20. They move. The Inquisitors come down their ramp in the specific formation of people who have done this before, spread wide, sabers drawn. The double-bladed spinning weapons already lit and rotating at the idle speed that generates just enough gyroscopic stability to deflect incoming fire. They are reading the valley. They are good at this. Palpatine built them to be good at this. Anakin knows how they were built. He knows because he was there for some of the building, not the recruitment, not the breaking. He was not present for those parts because Palpatine was careful about which parts of his operation he allowed his apprentice to witness directly, but the deployment. The tactical doctrine, the way they are trained to isolate targets, to use the terrain, to press psychological pressure through the specific combination of the spinning blade and the imperial authority they wear as visibly as the armor. He steps into the open. The Inquisitors stop. They were not expecting this face. He can see it in the way their formation tightens, an involuntary micro-adjustment. The specific recalibration of beings who planned for resistance and are now looking at a variable their briefing did not contain. He ignites the white blade. "I know your training," he says, not loudly. "The valley is narrow and the acoustics carry. I know your doctrine. I know the 17 standard engagement patterns you were taught and the 6 variants for enclosed terrain." He holds the saber low, not raised, not threatening, present. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that what happens in this valley in the next 10 minutes is not a fight you can win by executing what you know. So I'm asking you, all three of you, to make a different choice. The lead inquisitor, male, human, the red lines on his helmet marking him as the ranking officer, tilts his head. Surrender, he says from Darth Vader. Interesting, not Vader, Anakin says. Then you'll die as Skywalker. Easier, I suppose. He comes fast. They always come fast. It is the first doctrine, the opening gambit. The principle that the Inquisitorius teaches before any other, because it is the one that works against opponents who are not expecting it. Fast, aggressive, closing distance before the opponent's nervous system has completed the threat assessment. Anakin is not completing a threat assessment. He completed it 6 hours ago. He moves left, not back, into the lead Inquisitor's blade arc rather than away from it, inside the radius of the spinning blade where it generates the least force. And his white saber finds the mechanism housing on the crossguard and removes it with a single precise cut, and the spinning stops, and the Inquisitor has a conventional lightsaber now. And conventional lightsabers are a problem that Anakin Skywalker has been solving since he was 9 years old. He does not go for the kill. The disarm takes 4 exchanges. 4, which is not fast, which is longer than he could do it if he wanted to do it efficiently, but efficiency is not the point. The point is control. The point is demonstrating, to the Inquisitor and to the Jedi watching from the valley's edges, that the choice between ending this and extending it is entirely his, and he is choosing to extend it because he is choosing not to kill. On the 4th exchange, the Inquisitor's saber leaves his hand. He stands disarmed in the gray scrubland and looks at Anakin with an expression that contains, underneath the training and the armor and the Imperial authority, something that Anakin recognizes. Fear, and underneath the fear, further down, something older. Something that remembers being someone else. Before the choice that was not a choice. Not this time, Anakin says quietly, not ever again. He steps back. On his left, Obi-Wan has taken the second Inquisitor, a cleaner engagement. Economical, the specific efficiency of a man who has been the best living practitioner of Soresu for 30 years, and sees no reason to be theatrical about it. The second Inquisitor is on her knees, disarmed, unhurt. On his right, 3 of the surviving Jedi have contained the third. The valley is quiet. The gray scrubland moves in the cold wind. Anakin feels Obi-Wan before he hears him, the Force signature, warm and close, coming to stand at his shoulder with the specific ease of a man returning to a position he has occupied before, that his body remembers occupying, that feels, despite everything, like the correct place to be. There you are, Obi-Wan says. Not loudly. It is not for the valley. It is not for the Jedi watching from the edges or the disarmed Inquisitors on the ground. It is the kind of thing you say to someone when you have been looking for them for a very long time in a place you were not sure you were going to find them, and you have found them, and the relief of it is too large for any sentence that tries to be adequate to it, so you say the small true thing instead. Anakin does not look at him. He looks at the valley, at the ships, at the cold gray sky above the scrubland. Here I am, he says. They load in the last light of the moon's abbreviated day. Every person. Every ship. The Inquisitors are aboard the 4th transport, restrained but unharmed, because Anakin made the argument to Luminara Unduli that they are not enemies of their own making, and she looked at him for a long moment and did not disagree. The last transport is Anakin's. He is the last one up the ramp. He turns at the top and looks back at the valley, the scrubland, the cold, the gray light, the indifferent sky, and does not perform anything at this moment. He simply looks, and remembers, and turns away, and the ramp closes behind him. Above the moon, 4 transports push for the hyperspace corridor. The Empire's net is still out there, searching, triangulating, drawing its calculations across the star chart, with the specific patient malevolence of a man in an executive office, who does not believe in coincidence and has begun, now to understand what he is actually dealing with. But the net is empty. And the ships are through. Every life aboard them saved. The outpost lost. The coordinates burned. The moon abandoned to its cold scrubland and its gray sky. The Empire's victory, if it can be called that, is the destruction of a rock formation, and 3 Inquisitors who will need to explain, in the executive office, why they came back without what they were sent to retrieve. The transports jump to hyperspace. The moon goes dark behind them. The sanctuary world does not have a name on any chart. This is intentional. It sits in the unknown regions in the specific way of things that have always been there, but have never been convenient enough to name. A green world, temperate, with 2 small moons that rise together in the early evening and set together just before dawn, and forests of a particular deep blue-green that exists nowhere else in the galaxy that any of them have found. The air is clean in the way of places that have never had industry. The light, in the late afternoon, comes in at an angle that turns everything it touches to a color between gold and amber. The house is at the edge of the forest. Not large. 4 rooms and a porch and a garden that Padmé has been working on for 3 years, which means it has progressed from theoretical ambition to a practical reality that produces, among other things, a vine along the south wall that flowers twice a year in a color she cannot name because she has never seen it anywhere else and has therefore had to invent the word for it in her own private vocabulary. She has not told anyone the word. It is hers. 7 years have passed since the moon. The Empire is smaller than it was, not gone, not yet, but compressed, harried, forced to commit resources to the containment of a rebellion that activated years ahead of any schedule Palpatine calculated, because the man who knew his schedule gave it to people who knew what to do with it. The Death Star exists. It is not yet operational. Mon Mothma knows where the plans are kept. Bail knows the name of the officer who oversees the security rotation at Scarif. None of this is in the house at the edge of the forest. The house at the edge of the forest contains, on this particular afternoon, 2 9-year-old children who have been sitting cross-legged in the grass for 11 minutes and have reached the outer boundary of their patience with sitting cross-legged in the grass. Leia breaks first. "Why do we have to sit still?" she asks. She does not ask it toward the grass. She asks it toward the gray-robed man sitting 3 meters in front of her, cross-legged, eyes open, who has been sitting like this long enough that the light has moved noticeably across the lawn since he began. Uncle Obi-Wan says, "You used to be the best pilot in the galaxy." Anakin opens his eyes. He looks at her, this daughter who arrived in a medbay on Polis Massa, with a focused, evaluating expression, and has never once stopped evaluating anything, and his face does what it does when he looks at her, which is the thing he spent the first year of her life unable to predict, and has stopped trying to categorize. "I was," he says, "and someday you might be too." He holds her gaze. But first, sit still. Leia's expression makes clear her opinion of this instruction. Luke, beside her, has his eyes still closed. He has been sitting with genuine effort, not perfect stillness. He is 9, and perfect stillness is not available to 9-year-olds, but the authentic attempt of a child who has decided that the thing being asked of him is worth doing, and is therefore doing it with his whole self. He gets this from his mother. Anakin has never told him this. He doesn't need to. The shape of the inheritance is visible without narration. "What are we listening for?" Luke asks. Eyes still closed. "Nothing," Anakin says. "You're not listening for anything. You're just present here, in this specific moment, on this specific afternoon, with the grass under you and the light on your face." He pauses. The Force doesn't ask you to find it. It asks you to stop moving long enough that it can find you. Luke considers this. "That seems backwards," he says. "Most true things do, at first." Leia opens one eye. "Did someone teach you that?" Anakin is quiet for a moment. "Yes," he says. "Someone taught me that. I wasn't very good at listening to him." He looks at the grass, at the light on it, at the specific afternoon around them that is not asking anything of anyone. "I'm better at it now." On the porch, 2 people who have been listening to this exchange without participating in it sit with the particular ease of people who have learned, over years, when to be present and when to be quiet. Obi-Wan has a cup of something warm that Padmé made from a plant in the garden, whose name he has asked for 3 times and cannot retain. He is wearing civilian clothes, which after 35 years of Jedi robes he has still not fully made his peace with, and his beard is longer than regulation would have permitted, and grayer than either of them mention. He looks, in this light, like a man who has been through something enormous and come out the other side into an afternoon that he did not expect, and is not taking for granted. Padmé's beside him with her feet up on the porch railing, watching her children in the grass. She watches Leia's barely contained impatience. She watches Luke's earnest effort. She watches Anakin between them, gray-robed, unhurried, in no way resembling the man she met on a Coruscant balcony when she was 14 and he was 9, and the galaxy was still arranged around a set of assumptions that have since been proven wrong in almost every particular. He's good with them, Obi-Wan says. He's good at anything he actually tries to be good at. Padmé says, that was never the problem. Obi-Wan makes a sound that concedes the point without belaboring it. They sit. The afternoon sits with them. Do you think it works? Padmé asks. The rebellion, what we've built. Do you think it's enough? Obi-Wan looks at the grass, at the 3 figures in it, at the forest beyond them with its blue-green that exists nowhere else. I think, he says, carefully, the way he says things he has actually thought about, rather than things he is composing in real time, that we have made it considerably harder for the galaxy to end the way it was going to end. I think we have given the people who come after us more options than they would have had. He pauses. Whether that's enough, that's their question to answer. Not ours. Padmé looks at him sideways. That's a very Jedi answer, she says. I'm a very Jedi person, he says. It's been pointed out to me before. She smiles. It is a real smile, the kind that arrives without decision, that her face produces when something is genuinely, simply, without complication, good. He's teaching them Qui-Gon's opening meditation, Obi-Wan says, quietly, watching the grass. The sequence, the one I passed to him in the 5th year of his training, during the Draboon posting. He is quiet for a moment. I didn't tell him to use it. No, Padmé says. He just remembered, and decided it was worth keeping. The vine along the south wall moves in the light wind. In the grass, Leia has closed both eyes. Finally. Not in acceptance. Leia does not accept things. In the decision that she has assessed this activity and concluded that doing it properly will yield more information than doing it halfway. Luke has not moved. Anakin, between them, sits with his hands in his lap and his face toward the double moons that are beginning, in the pale early evening, to become visible against the not yet dark sky. He is not performing peace. That is the thing, the only thing, that Obi-Wan could not have predicted, in the elevator on Coruscant or the skiff over Mustafar or the transport through hyperspace, could not have predicted because he has never seen it before in Anakin Skywalker's face, which for 30 years wore restlessness the way other people wear skin. The restlessness is gone, not suppressed, not managed. Gone, the way a fever breaks and leaves the body simply itself, without the heat, without the labor of maintaining it. What is there instead is the ordinary face of an ordinary afternoon. In the grass, Anakin breathes. The light is doing what late light does, lengthening, warming, making ordinary things luminous without effort. The grass blades, the far edge of the forest, his daughter's dark hair, his son's closed face, open in the specific way of someone genuinely listening. He lost everything once. He lost it by degrees and then all at once, and then slowly rebuilt the understanding of what he had destroyed, in the dark, in the suit, in the long mechanical years of a life that had no afternoon in it, no grass, no children with strong opinions about sitting still. He lost the galaxy. He kept his soul. It was, at last, enough. The twin moons rise. The light goes amber and then rose and then the soft gray of a day, completing itself without drama, without conclusion, simply ending in the way of days on a world that has never once been in any imperial chart, that has no name on any record, that exists. This porch, This garden, this grass, these 4 people. In the specific privacy of a future that was not supposed to happen and did. Leia opens her eyes. She looks at the moons. She does not say anything, which for Leia is the closest available equivalent to awe. Luke opens his eyes a moment later. He looks at his father. Something passes between them that does not require the Force to carry. That would pass between any father and any son, in any afternoon in any world. The simple, sufficient recognition of 2 people who are, without qualification, glad to be in the same place, at the same time. Anakin looks back. The moons rise. The forest breathes. The day ends. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.